I've never been to jail. The worst thing I ever got was a speeding ticket. And after these 4 true scary stories, I'm pretty sure I never want to be. So anyways, grab a blanket, turn off your lights for 4 true scary horror stories that happened in jails and prisons. Prison Riot. Back in the 60s, my dad worked as a guard at a prison near Miami. He described his most memorable experience to me recently. He says that there was this one prisoner who looked a lot like a younger Hannibal Lecter. Very calm but very menacing. He always kept his cool no matter what, but there was something threatening about him. Well, one day, young Lecter was able to start a riot on his cell block, purely by motivating the other prisoners into a frenzy. He didn't participate in the riot at all, but he got every other prisoner to start a fit in their cell. My dad and a few other guards were called down to the cell block to quiet them down. He says that when he got there, every prisoner was screaming and throwing themselves against the walls of their cells and shouting profanity and insults to the guards. That is, every prisoner except Lecter. He was the only quiet one on the whole block. My dad came up close to his cell, and the guy was standing near the back with his hands folded, staring my dad directly in the eye, and muttering a random sentence of numbers with a strange smile on his face. My dad stood there, trying to figure out what the numbers meant, and then it finally hit him. The prisoner was reciting my dad's home phone number on repeat. Creepy guy in jail. At my elementary school, we usually took 2 to 3 field trips a year. We went to normal places like the zoo, the park, or a historical place. But the school decided to do something out of the ordinary this time. The school, for some reason, thought a good place for a field trip would be the local jail. Nothing like being 8 or 9 and going to a place where criminals live. My classmates and I were walked to the jail by our teachers. We were greeted by an officer, and he began to give us a tour of the jail. We were took to a room, and they showed us the cameras around the jail. The tour went on and on. We had reached a pair of mental door, and the police officer turned to us. He asked us something like, "Is anyone uncomfortable seeing the prisoners?" Of course, nobody said anything, and we went inside. He typed in the code, and the first set of doors opened. He typed in another password, and opened the second set of doors. We walked in and could see the prisoners having lunch behind the glass. We weren't in any danger. They were a few 100 feet away, and there was glass separating us. The glass had to be at least a few inches thick, and it was bulletproof. The officer began to tell us about the food they ate when my friend nudged me. I turned to her. She had a nervous expression. I smiled, and she seemed to calm down. I turned my attention back to the officer, only to have her nudge me again. I mumbled something like, "Pay attention." She started nudging me harder and harder, so it felt like she was going to push me over. She whispered my name, sounding panicked. I turned to see what it was and saw a guy looking at me. This guy had his gaze fixed on me intently. I heard a rustling sound and looked to see he was wearing handcuffs and leg cuffs. This guy was no more than 40 feet away from us. When I looked back up, our eyes met and a smile stretched onto his face. The smile reminded me of Ted Bundy. The guy looked around real quickly before starting to walk towards me. He was stopped by the officer leading him, and the others and the police officer with us walked over to me and had his hand on his taser and was looking at the guy as he was dragged into the room. When the field trip was over, my friend had told me that one of the guys had put his finger to his neck while smiling at her and made a slicing motion. I have so many questions. Who was that guy? What was he in for? What did he want with me? The questions that will probably never be answered. So, creepy prison guy, let's not meet again. Be careful in jail. Let me preface this by saying that I'm a correctional officer. I'm female and about 5'3". I've worked in a large county jail for going on 13 years now, And in my time there, I've had some harrowing experiences and met some extremely creepy and violent individuals. However, of all the strange situations I've been in, there's one that I find especially disturbing in retrospect. I was 20 at the time, and barely off probation. I was young and stupid, and didn't have the experience needed to truly understand how dangerous my job was at that point. I was working the night shift, 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., locked in a room with dozens of inmates, and nothing but a handheld radio to protect me. The pod I was assigned to housed 72 inmates. State law says you're supposed to have one officer for 48 inmates. In actuality, we had 2 pods side by side with 72 inmates each. There's one officer assigned to each pod, and a third officer who's supposed to float back and forth between the 2 housing units. This third officer is hardly ever present until lunchtime. At some point, they're assigned to some other random detail in the facility, escorting inmates, supervising trustees, etc. Now, you might assume that jails are divided by types of criminals, like misdemeanors housed separately from felons, but this is only the case after someone goes to court and gets convicted. Most people in county are still awaiting trial, so they're all mixed together. The guy with the unpaid parking tickets might be cellmates with a murderer. You never know. So you never really know who you're dealing with until you look them up. To paint a picture of the environment, the pod itself is a lot like a college dorm. There's a large central day room with 2 tiers of individual rooms circling the perimeter. There's a stairway on either side of the pod leading to the second tier. Right beside one stairway is the bathroom and shower area. Now, this is what we call a direct inmate supervision setup, so the officer is locked in the pod with the inmates. Theoretically, your sister pod next door should be keeping an eye on you. There's a glass wall between the 2 pods, but in reality, they usually don't have time to remember you exist. Back in the day, we locked all the inmates into their cells every night at midnight, and they stayed in until breakfast time, around 4 a.m. On the day this story occurred, I was assigned to a floor that housed male inmates. We have both male and females in the facility. My relief officer, Officer Smith, was out and about on some other assignment, so I was alone at midnight. I told all the inmates to rack down, and they scattered off into different directions to their cells. When the day room appeared to be empty, I stood up to go do a security check. Check all the doors and make sure that they were locked. I started on the far side of the pod, away from the bathroom area, and walked upstairs. I went around the catwalk, making sure each cell door was properly secured. My sister pod was doing the same thing. The day room appeared deserted. As I made my way past the cells, I circled the catwalk, happy for the peace and quiet that I knew I'd be getting for the next 4 hours. I was walking along, oblivious, not paying any attention to anything other than the doors I was checking. I approached the head of the stairs and began to take a step down. As my foot hit the top step, I heard a loud pounding on the pod door. Boom, boom, boom. Startled, I snapped my attention and looked over to the catwalk, to the door. Officer Smith was standing there, and he was pointing dramatically to the foot of the stairs. I heard him yelling, but I couldn't make out what he was saying. About that time, I see someone dart out from behind the stairs, butt naked, and running across the day room. Apparently, a large, well-muscled inmate had been hiding behind the shower curtain while I did my rounds, and had crept out to wait beneath the stairs and, I assume, ambush me as I came down them. The inmate played it off as a prank, and nothing was done to him. I was good and scared, and to this day, I still keep a close watch on my stairways when I'm doing rounds. Maybe he was just planning to scare me, but I'll never know. If Officer Smith hadn't returned at just the right minute, there's no telling what might have happened to me. This incident shook me and really made me take my job more seriously. I've had a ton of interesting experiences since then. I've spoken with serial killers, hitmen, necrophiliacs, high-profile criminals, been in a ton of fights, had boiling water thrown at me, dealt with crazy people of every type, but this incident really stands out for me, and I share it with every rookie I get a chance to. The heightened awareness I gained from this incident may have saved my life many times over. The prison. I grew up going to a private American school in a foreign country in Europe, which I shall not name. The school was situated kind of in the middle of a big hill, and even further above the school was something really special, an abandoned prison. Now, as if that was not shady enough, bordering the abandoned prison was a real prison. There was kind of like a wall separating the real prison from the abandoned one, and I can show you guys if you want. So anyways, me and my friends, being the teenagers we are, decided to find a way to break into the abandoned part. As you can see, we had already gotten beyond the second layer of the wall. There was a total of 3, and the wall ran all the way around with barbed wires in many places. One lunch, I heroically managed to tear down a huge section of the wall during lunch, but the next day we arrived and it was patched up by someone. That did not stop us though. We climbed on through anyways and decided to do some exploring. Now this happened over the course of many months, and it took us ages to work up the courage to finally get inside. A bunch of us were doing AP 2D art and had our cameras with us at all times to get some shots. Half of my best work came from this prison, but one day an event happened that made us all swear to never go back. So as the months and months went by, we got more and more confident wandering about the prison. We never went too deep, and we were always scared of getting close to the wall with the real prison because there were always security guards. Sometimes we would run into some gypsies scraping for metal, sometimes a random homeless person or two, but never anything dangerous. Once a couple guys got busted by security, and we didn't go back for weeks, but eventually we learned the schedule of the guards and befriended the homeless who hung out around there, so we were pretty comfortable. 2 years went by of some exploring here and there until one night, a friend and I decided to go there to do some late night shooting. We dressed up, organized our things, and met by one of the holes of entry at midnight. We had videos of us going through some of the sections of the prison this night, but we deleted them out of fear. We never wanted to have anyone know what happened this night, and we thought the videos could be traced. It was really dark in the depths of the prison, so the reason we were filming was to use a flashlight on our iPhones. This was a while back, and you couldn't just press a button to get the light, but had to film something. Our goal tonight was to get as high as we could. There were at least something like 10 floors, and almost all the staircases we had found during our daily exploring were sealed off. If we spent lunch breaking one down, the next day it would be repaired again. The prison was huge and had many staircases all over the place. I will have access to all pictures in a few months if you want to see all the rooms. Now, most of the rooms were fairly large. Each floor was completely different to the previous one, and it was very hard to tell what went on there. From what we could gather, it was some sort of labor factory the prisons were forced to work in. We found some rooms completely full of shoe soles. Another room had a long hallway, and each room was vividly painted in different patterns. Some rooms had a lot of mattresses stacked on top of each other. You get it. A whole lot of creepy-ass rooms with creepy random-ass shit. Every new floor we explored was a totally new surprise, and it kept becoming more and more difficult to find ways to go higher up. But eventually, we found it, and that's what we came here to do that night, get to the roof. As I mentioned, this prison was on a hill, so the view was bound to be fantastic, and we thought at night the guards will have a harder time spotting us. So back to the night. We kept getting deeper and deeper, and it got darker and darker. There were dripping noises everywhere around us, and we couldn't tell if we were alone. We got to our desired staircase, and as we climbed up, there became fewer and fewer windows, until we were climbing up into pitch darkness. I'm shaking as I'm even typing this, remembering the pure terror I felt. Nonetheless, it was only unsecured entrance, so we kept climbing and climbing. Things started to get weird. The stairs were in the form of a zigzag, so you could fall down the middle. To get to the staircase, you had to go through a long and dark hallway, so once you're at the bottom of the stairs, there's almost no light. Soon, we began to realize that at the end of each zigzag, there were these holes in the wall. To get through one, you'd have to pull yourself up into it, because there was just a tiny slit at the top. We flipped a coin and it was decided I was to go through. I wish I never had. I pray to God I never had. I crawled through and hopped inside into a box-like confinement with no windows or anything. You couldn't fully stand up. You had to either lay down or squat. I looked around and found pornography plastered all over the walls of this place, as well as tissues and other disgusting stuff. Injection needles were among one of the things there too, and I believe I have a picture of that somewhere. That wasn't the worst part though. The worst part was when I took a look at the notebook laying on the ground. The writing was in a foreign language which I could read, and it was documented a worker's log. There was a name, followed by a sign-in and sign-out timestamp. The most recent entry was made 2 days ago. 2 fucking days ago. I rushed out of that space like my life depended on it and told my friend we've got to get going. While I was inside, my friend noticed that there were one of these slits on every level and that they were numbered and had a placeholder for a tag. They were cells. We noped the hell out of there and began climbing down when I reasoned to my friend that it's almost 1 a.m. and we need to go up now before it's too late. We were going to a club after this. It took me some time, but finally I persuaded him to go back up and make it to the roof, then leave. We went up and up and up until finally we saw light. Delighted, we burst through the door completely without thinking and began expressing our relief in cries of joy. We felt like we had conquered the worst part and completely relaxed. Everything was going great until suddenly my friend freezes in his tracks and tells me to shut the hell up right now and get to the staircase. Panicked, I asked him what he's on about. The staircase we had just come from had a little house over it, if that makes sense, and he was looking at something over the edge of the corner. Then I hear another voice, which is definitely not my friend's. We were both these 2 fairly well-off kids from America, and the man was speaking a foreign language. Luckily, I could understand it, but we liked to frequently pretend that I did not know what the fuck they were saying and just spy on people. He was used to me routinely pretending I didn't understand a word, so when the man said something, he just stayed quiet and motioned that I keep my mouth shut. My friend was signaling for me to get to the staircase when I heard the man yell, "Don't move," in the foreign language. I froze dead and didn't know what to do. 5 men come from around the house thingy into my sight. 2 were standing. The others were sitting on the curb of the roof. 1 push and they tumbled down to their deaths. Now, these guys look serious. Pumped arms, sweatpants, bandanas, and for the best part, swastikas on their arms. The prison had a lot of racist, anti-Jew, anti-immigrant, anti-people in general type stuff going on. If I find the other pictures, I will share with you for sure. This we never expected though. The man motions at me and yells, "Come here." I nervously tell him in English that I do not understand. I don't know how I thought this would help, but I speak quite a bit of German, and I suppose in my logical brain, I thought maybe they would do less harm to 2 Germans. By luck, my friend happened to be Swiss and spoke it fluently. The man yells to us, "What language you speaking?" I reply, "Deutsche." My friend looks over to me panicking, desperate to know what our next move should be. "Ah, Germans!" And the group laughs. I hear one of the men say to the other in the foreign language, "They've seen the products." The head of the gang looks at us and comes closer. It was really dark, so I couldn't see what they had circled around, but there were black gym bags at their feet. "Come closer," he says to both of us. We come up closer to the group, and the man starts asking us questions in English, who we are, why we were there. He then started asking personal questions, our full names, where we live, etc. The questions were clearly directed at making it easier to find out as much as they can about us. Neither of us had money, but we both had our iPhones on us. We had no idea what they were planning to do to us next. One of the sitting guys gets up and asks me, "Did you see anything?" "No," I shakily reply. Then he comes to my friend and asks them the same question. For a brief moment, I glanced over at the bags, and I suddenly wished I would be anywhere but there. Hell, I'd rather be in that cell than there. I wish we had never come back. I think you can guess what was in the bags. Guns. Not just one gun. Guns. As in bags and bags of what was probably illegal firearms. In a smaller bag to the side, there were a ton of rolled up cash. We just stumbled onto an illicit firearm deal. The guy now started discussing amongst each other about what they were going to do with us. They didn't know that I understood every single word. One of them kept pleading we're just stupid kids, and that if they rough us up a bit, we won't tell anybody. Another one insisted that they take us to Gustav. I'm happy I never met Gustav. Meanwhile, I'm trying to come up with an escape plan. The real prison was visible from where we were standing, but by the time the security guards from there would get up here, we would be dead. The staircase where we came from was pitch black, and we would stumble our way down and probably die. Either way, we would end up dead, so I go for plan C. Mr. Ringleader says to them that one of them should walk us home to see where we live and threaten us if we tell. That's when I had a better idea. The roofs. We could run back down to the stairs, but the abandoned prison complex was huge, and basically many buildings of different sizes all near each other. You could hop down from roof to roof and escape via that way. Just as one of them starts arguing about taking us to Gustav, one of their phone rings, and I take that as a cue. I scream, "Follow me!" to my friend, and begin descending down the roofs. Now, I know this is stupid logic, but I thought they would never shoot us near a real prison. It's too risky. Our feet hit the ground, and we began running through the grounds. Since I knew it quite well, I knew exactly where to run to escape to a main road on the other side of the hill. I suddenly heard men yelling in the background, and the sound of barking dogs. Security from the real prison must have seen us running, and came to see who it was. I screamed to them in the foreign language, "There's men, and they've got guns!" It seems they already knew we were not the primary concern, as they ran in the direction we came from, and not to where we were going. We didn't stop running until we reached the city center, and we didn't return to the prison. We never reported anything that happened, and have no follow-up on who the men were. Illegal drugs and stuff were common where we were living. Never thought to find guns though. To be honest though, it wasn't the first time we heard about weapon deals going on. It's hushed up, but it's not that hard to get your hands on where we lived. We didn't go back for months, needless to say. To think that roof could have been the last thing I saw. Or Gustavo's apartment.